Hello, I'm George Friday. I'm a member of the Southern Piedmont branch in North Carolina. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how domestic violence and intimate partner violence and community violence affects and is expressed within the African American community. At the beginning of the 2000s in Chatham County, North Carolina, I was the project director for a program called Safe Start that had a $3.3 million federal grant from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention to help mitigate consequences of community violence on young children. And one of the priorities that I brought to that project was the importance of underscoring the effects of chronic white supremacy and racism on individuals, families, and communities of color, and to challenge the perception that within communities of color and low income communities, there is a large amount of violence in communities and families and between individuals. I want to show you what our policymakers in this country currently are still used as a resource or a reference when it comes to violence in the African American community. This is from the Office of Justice Programs. And the folks that I was funded for back then was the Office of Juvenile Justice, again, under this same banner or department heads. It was so much bureaucracy, it's crazy. But as you can see, this is from 2008. And basically, I want to call your attention to the second sentence here that says research identifies a number of risk factors associated with intimate partner violence among African Americans. They list poverty, high rates of unemployment, alcohol abuse, use of illegal drugs, exposure to community or family violence. You will note they do not mention chronic racism, oppression, white supremacy. No, this is 2008. And unfortunately, these are the people that set policies, that set priorities. And one of the biggest dangers that happens to all um, people who experience partner violence is risk of child protection services taking custody of children or putting children in foster care. One of the things we were able to change in the project that I was part of was policies that the DSS would use to determine abuse or neglect. And that's important because often people who have fewer resources, it may look like they're not meeting the needs of their families, but that's a misconception. And often individuals experiencing in-home violence may not try to change their circumstances. They may not try to leave that situation until their children are under threat of violence. That's usually what makes the difference. I learned these things during my time as a project director in Chatham County. I learned a lot about what happens with violence. I also was blessed to learn about a great resource that still exists. At the time, um, there were programs in the state of Minnesota and particularly in the city of Minneapolis that really was doing feminist based thinking about these issues. And we got to work with them because we were a national project. So we would meet together and have retreats. We got to discuss some of these issues. And now, if you go to the website of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, you will see something like this when it comes to what's going on with domestic violence and the Black community. Let's look at their context when you compare it to what the official government site talks about. Due to systemic racism, racist policies, and racist societal structures, both Black men and Black women experience intimate partner violence at a disproportionately high rate. But they're putting this in context. So, yes, there is violence in African American and people of color communities that affects a larger part of that population. And part of what we're challenged to do, or maybe challenged to do, is to think through how do we support and strengthen communities and families. One of the many things I learned in my experience is the importance of resilience. That first site I showed to y'all, the Office of Justice programs, mentioned risk factors like poverty and high unemployment. There are also protective factors that exist. And protective factors exist for individuals, children, adults, males, females, and communities. So think about the protective factors that the communities you care about and you work with have already, the assets that can be built upon. Often it's relationships with trusted adults that exist in almost any community that everyone looks up to, that everyone goes to for advice and support. And increasing the number of those kind of individuals so that more people step forward to offer support, guidance, care without deep criticism, and accountability without shame or blame. And then you've got an asset for your community to help protect communities, families, children, and individuals from any kind of violence. I hope all goes well. Thank you.